Imagine for a moment that you're a woman in a country where your very existence is a crime. A country where you're not allowed to go to school, to work, or even to leave your home without the permission of a man. A country where you're beaten and tortured with impunity. This is a reality for countless women around the world, and it's a reality that our current asylum laws fail to adequately address. As I stand before you today, I want to introduce you to the story of two sisters, Maria and Rosa. They grew up in a small village in Sierra Leone, a country where the practice of female genital mutilation, which we'll refer to going forward as FGM, is deeply rooted in tradition. According to the United Nations Population Fund, approximately 90% of girls and women in Sierra Leone have undergone this harmful and traumatic procedure. So this is their story, but it's also the story of so many others who seek safety and justice in a world that often denies them both. And it also exemplifies an antiquated legal framework that needs to change. So, unlike most other girls who undergo FGM at a very young age, Maria and Rosa were spared this torture by their parents, who were amongst the few opposing this practice. When she got married, Rosa left her family and moved to her husband's village. As soon as she got there, the women of the village, as it was customary, inspected her body. Realizing that she had not been cut, they immediately proceeded with the mutilation of her genitals. As it often happens, the procedure was carried out without any kind of sanitary precaution. As such, Maria developed a deadly infection and ultimately died as a result of it. Before her death, she called her sister Rosa to inform her about the forced FGM and also to warn her that the same fate would await her. In fear for her life, Rosa immediately left the country. She was gone for many, many years and only decided to get back to Sierra Leone when her father died to attend his funeral. As soon as she got back to her village, she went out in the fields to pick flowers for the funeral arrangements. Suddenly, she realized she had been surrounded by a bunch of women. These women forcefully took her and brought her into the forest and inside a hut, where they began performing FGM. Halfway through the procedure, Rosa managed to convince these women that she had to use the restroom, and once in the bathroom, she escaped through a window. Bleeding and in shock, she hid under a bush not too far from the hut. From that hiding point, she saw these women coming out looking for her. Miraculously, she managed to escape and came to the United States to seek asylum. Choice. It's a word that holds immense power and significance in shaping the trajectories of our lives. Born in Milan, I was fortunate enough to grow up in an environment that allowed me the privilege to make my own choices and shape my own destiny. I chose to become a lawyer and practice in the field of human rights and international law. From a very young age, I was mesmerized by the interconnectedness of our world and by the rights, struggles, and aspirations of people living in different countries. Curious to explore, I left Italy and I went to the United States to pursue my master's degree. I became a lawyer, and in Los Angeles, I started working as an attorney with refugees and asylum seekers. It so happened that many of my clients were women who had undergone unspeakable atrocities and abuses. As a human, of course, their stories tore at my heart. But as a lawyer, I was shocked to realize that the existing laws failed to offer them the protection that they so desperately needed. And so as I was trying to help them, my hands were tied by the law. My own privilege to choose served as a stark reminder of the countless women around the world who are robbed of this fundamental right, the right to choose and shape their own destiny. Every woman deserves the right to be free to choose how to shape her own life, free from the shackles of violence and persecution. To achieve this, we must change the existing laws so that choice is not a luxury, but a fundamental right for all. So let's go back to Rosa for a second, who, by the way, is my client. Rosa is not alone in the persecution that she suffered. Look at the person on your left and look at the person on your right. If the three of you are women, one of you will suffer physical or sexual violence in her lifetime. According to statistics, 1 in 3 women will be the victim of violence in her lifetime. And in many countries in the world, women are systematically persecuted because of their gender. This notwithstanding, under current asylum laws, gender is not a recognized ground for asylum. The law only protects you if you're part of a recognized persecuted group, and gender is not one of them. To be granted asylum, you need to be able to prove that you suffer past persecution and that this past persecution was inflicted upon you because of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or particular social group. These are the 5 categories for asylum. So in the case of a woman who was the victim of gender-motivated persecution, and with gender not being one of the grounds, she's out of luck. This is obviously absurd. And so the bedrock of international human rights law on the topic of refugees and asylum seekers is the 1967 protocol relating to the status of refugees. The protocol created the 5 categories for asylum as we have them today. And it did so in the aftermath of World War II, in response to the World War II brutalities. At that time, the perception was that persecution was inflicted upon people because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. But 60 years is a very long time. The world and people worldviews have evolved since then. Our society has changed significantly. To give you an example of what society looked like back then, just think about the fact that in the United States, up until 1967, interracial marriage was illegal. And it was only legalized then by the landmark Supreme Court case Loving v. Virginia. Or to give you a sense of how much time has passed, just think about the first man on the moon in 1969. The protocol even predates the moon landing. That's how old it is. The law is not and cannot be a static entity, because who becomes a victim can potentially change over time. Failing to understand this would be predicated on the assumption that history is static when it's not. Gender and gender-based persecution was not fully understood or recognized in the 60s. The experiences of women were not fully recognized or understood in the 60s. The outlook of our society has expanded. And so our laws must reflect this change, because if this doesn't happen, the existing legal framework is a cage for the very people that it's meant to protect. And those 5 grounds are the bars of that cage. The United Nations itself has acknowledged the need for a gender-sensitive interpretation of the 1967 protocol. And it has also taken action in sponsoring conventions aimed at the protection of women. While well-intending, of course, these conventions are self-standing because they lack a bridge with the protocol itself. And so the answer is to change the protocol once and for all. While each country could and should amend its own laws so as to include gender as a protected ground for asylum, changing the protocol itself would set a universal standard for each signatory state to follow. And it would also send a strong message that gender-based persecution is a serious human rights violation and that the international community is united in offering protection to those who need it. And so freedom of choice is the ultimate goal. I chose to lend my voice to women who don't have one. And I would like to ask you to choose to spread awareness on this topic. Because as awareness spreads, it becomes a catalyst for change, and it also puts pressure on decision makers. The greatest movements of change have started with people uniting and demanding change and believing in their power to make it happen. And so, with legal professionals and advocates acting on the legal front, and the passionate public driving the demand for change, we will make this happen. Thank you.